Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife went into the motel, but it was caught on a camera that the husband set up. But for what? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Hi, my name is Barry Scott. I'm 32 years old, 6 feet tall, and 200 pounds. I am married to Linda, a beautiful 32-year-old red-haired woman. We have been married for 4 years and are very happy. We met at a party thrown by her best friend, Claire, to celebrate her engagement to my best friend, Larry. I saw her from across the room and immediately knew that we were meant for each other. I asked her to dance, and we danced all night long. At the end of the party, I asked her out, and she accepted. We dated for 6 months and then got married. Larry was my best man, and Claire was her maid of honor. Life seemed great at the time. I had just returned from the military after completing 2 tours as a ranger in SOG. I hadn't decided what I would do next, so when Colonel Scott approached me, I listened to what he had to say. He wanted to recruit me into the Langley Special Forces. I said I was interested, and we started working together. I was awarded both a Purple Heart and a Silver Cross for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. My role was to be the main performer, handling all the dirty work while the rest of the team provided support. They handled tasks such as finding the target, organizing transport, creating false documents, and equipment acquisition. I would eliminate the target using whatever equipment was provided, following instructions on whether to make a statement or make it look like an accident. My civilian cover was as a security consultant for the government, with a 6-figure annual salary. When sent for consultation, I was actually on a mission, for which I received an additional $250,000 for danger. This money was deposited into a numbered account in a Swiss bank, and I kept the data in a safe deposit box at an independent bank 200 miles from home. During the free time between missions, I started day trading and saved up a nice nest egg for when we had kids. As I mentioned, we were happy and money was not an issue since Linda worked at an advertising agency as a personal assistant to sales manager Albert Weiss. He was a sweet old man who wanted to retire with his wife after 30 years of marriage. Linda often worked late and sometimes accompanied Albert to sales meetings around the country. I had no problem with this as I sometimes also went away for 2 weeks for a consultation. Problems began when Albert retired and a new sales manager, Clive West, was hired to replace him. This happened in September, and for the next 3 months, all I heard from Linda was how Clive had done it or how Clive was teaching her a lot and wanted her to be on the sales team. When I pointed out that Clive could probably walk on water, she stopped mentioning him. At this stage, I wasn't worried because I trusted Linda completely and knew she would never betray me. However, I looked forward to the Christmas party that Linda's company threw every year so I could meet Mr. Barr. The party was supposed to take place a week before Christmas, and as usual, Linda was excited about the upcoming event and her new outfit. I was wearing a tuxedo and waiting at the bottom of the stairs when Linda came into view. I took a sharp breath. She looked amazing in an emerald green dress with 4-inch red heels, and a ruby necklace, earrings, and bracelet that I had given her for our anniversary. "You're so dressed up this year. Who are you trying to impress?" I teased. She turned away shyly and answered, "I want to look my best for my attractive man." I smiled and said, "And who is it, you stupid?" "Who else?" "Okay, let's go then," she replied. We arrived 10 minutes early and were shown to our table. I noticed we were sitting alone and asked Linda about it. We usually sat with some of her colleagues that I chatted with while she mingled with the crowd. The dinner was good but not great, and as we were finishing the last of the wine, Linda left the table. I watched her walk down the hall toward a tall, handsome man in an Armani suit, about 5 years older than us. She touched his arm to get his attention, pointed at me, and they walked to our table. "Barry, this is my boss Clive." "Clive, this is my husband Barry." I stood up and shook his hand. He tried to squeeze my hand, but when I did the same, he quickly removed his hand. "You have a strong grip, Barry." "You too, Clive. How do you like working at Benson's?" "I'm gradually getting used to it, with the help of your beautiful wife. I'm looking forward to working with Linda even closer in the future," he said with a smirk on his face. His intentions toward my wife were obvious. I looked at Linda, who turned away. Time to tighten up his chain, I said. Linda, what did I say? Linda, that's her name, not Lynn. The last time I called her Lynn, she didn't talk to me for 2 days. Her name is Linda. Please use it. Oh, sure, sorry. No offense. Don't worry. If you offended me, you would know about it. Linda now blushed and turned Clive around, saying, It's time to communicate and introduce you to those you haven't met yet. She looked at me angrily and left. I was used to Linda making the rounds with Albert, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. This usually took about an hour, and I would sit and talk to her colleagues at our table. When I looked for a familiar face, they either turned away or looked down at their desks. This was not good. I sat alone, watching Linda and Clive walk around the room. Every time they stopped, he moved closer to Linda and placed his hand on her thigh. I was angry, especially because she didn't mention anything about it to him. To a casual observer, they looked like a couple on a date. I recorded a few minutes of this behavior and decided what to do next. I was left alone for more than 2 hours. I could either make a scene or just go home. I decided to go home. I left a note for Linda, got my coat, and left. The note said, You don't need me here, so I'm going home. Take a taxi. No kind words, no kisses, no I love you at the end. When I came home 20 minutes later, there was still no word from Linda. I turned off the phone and went to bed, falling asleep immediately. I was awakened by the sound of the bedroom door opening and the light turning on. I looked at my watch. I had been home for 2 hours already. What was it? You embarrassed me in front of my boss and just walked away, leaving me to fend for myself. What is wrong with you? Not today. We'll talk in the morning. Oh no, we'll talk now. I took the phone and showed her clips of her and Clive. You left me alone for over 2 hours while you and Clive paraded around the hall like a pair of lovers. Nobody wanted to meet my eyes. They were too embarrassed. If you don't believe me, just look at this. I started the clips, and she sat up, frowning as she watched. I went into the guest room and locked the door. Shortly after, she knocked on the door, and when I didn't answer, she said, Barry, I'm so sorry. I understand why you're so upset. I didn't mean to offend you. There's nothing between me and Clive, I swear. Please open the door. See you at breakfast. Good night. The next morning, I got up, did my chores, and took a shower. As I was going downstairs, I smelled food. She made one of my favorite dishes, waffles with bacon and eggs. When I entered the kitchen, there was already coffee on the table, and she was just serving breakfast. I thanked her for breakfast and started eating. She waited until I finished and then started talking. I'm really sorry. I watched those clips, and we really looked like a couple. I didn't realize how it looked from the outside. I'm sorry for putting you in this position, but I swear there's nothing between us. Please believe me. I believe you, Linda, but you have to stay away from him. He almost directly told me that he was going to seduce you. He is a predator, and you are his prey. He doesn't care who knows about it. And where does he get the right to call you Lynn? When I did that, you blew up at me. He's my boss, so he can call me whatever he wants. I don't like it, but what can I do? And as for his desire to seduce me, you were mistaken. He's always been a gentleman. Linda, he's playing you like a cheap violin. You didn't even blink when he placed his hand on your thigh. Before you say anything, let me explain how this happened. First, he called you into his office to pick up papers and discuss work. Then he began to bring them himself and bend over you, accustomed to invading your personal space. He then started briefly placing his hand on your shoulder, getting you used to his touch. Over time, you stopped noticing that the touches became longer until he began talking to you at your table, placing his hand on your shoulder. So when he put his hand on your thigh, you didn't think anything of it. It became the norm. I sat and looked at my wife for a few minutes. You have to understand that there are predators who specialize in seducing married women. They take pleasure in cuckolding their husbands, and Clive is one of them. His next step will be to invite you to lunch and sit next to you so he can accidentally touch you. He'll reach for the salt or maybe a carafe of water and touch your chest. Of course, he'll apologize, but it will happen again. The next step is a celebratory dinner with wine to lower your resistance, followed by a kiss on the cheek and him holding your hand on the way to the car. You won't resist because he's your boss, and what's wrong with that? He will continue to compliment you and find any excuse for physical contact until he feels that you have accepted it as the norm, just like at the party. The next step is to invite you to dinner at a restaurant with a dance floor in the hotel. It is already close to completion. After a few times to make you feel comfortable, he will make his move. He will find an opportunity to kiss you on the lips, and if you resist, he will apologize, saying something like, "I'm so sorry. You're just so beautiful, I couldn't resist. Please forgive me." And, of course, you will forgive him. Next time, he'll be convinced you've had too much and try again, or maybe slip a pill into your drink to lower your inhibitions. Before you know what's happening, you'll be in his room, wondering how it happened. I bet he'll have you in bed by next Christmas Eve if you stay as his personal assistant. I looked at Linda. She was crying, tears running down her chin. You can't be serious. You know that I will never cheat on you. I'm quite capable of dealing with Carl if he tries to do something. It upsets me that you think so little of me that I could fall for his tricks. I'm not a teenager with stars in my eyes. Linda, I didn't mean to offend you, and I trust you completely. But predators like him have a way of getting past your defenses. For him, you're just another victory. Look how easily he came between us tonight. This is our first serious argument since we met. Doesn't that tell you anything? Okay, you're right. But forewarned is forearmed. If something like this happens, I'll stop him and inform HR. Is that okay? Not really. If you love me as much as you say you do and value our marriage, you will quit tomorrow. I love you more than life itself, but I won't let a predatory idiot drive me out of a job I love. You said you're ready to bet on the result. I am too. If he doesn't get me into bed by the next Christmas party, you'll buy me that Porsche I've always wanted. What if he does? Whatever you want. I can't lose. Okay, I'll think of something. I dropped the issue, and life continued as usual. We went to work, socialized with friends, and made love several times a week. About 2 months later, I brought up the topic again. Linda, it's been 2 months since we talked about Carl. Has he invited you to dinner yet? Linda looked embarrassed, as if she was trying to hide something. I won't give you any information until you tell me what you want if I lose. I knew she was trying to avoid answering, and I was concerned about our marriage. I knew he had invited her, but did she accept? I thought about the situation, and the more I thought, the more I became convinced that I was right. I decided to protect myself financially and asked my lawyer to prepare a prenuptial agreement. If she cheats, she will only leave with the clothes on her back and what's in her account, and nothing else. That night, when she returned home after dinner, I placed the prenuptial agreement in front of her. What is this? You asked me to decide what I want if you lose our argument. This is a marriage contract. If you cheat on me before the next Christmas party, you'll only leave with your clothes and what's in your account. She looked at me as if I were from another planet. Are you serious? Like a heart attack. Are you confident enough in your ability to stand up to Carl that you will sign this document, or have you already started going to dinners with him? She took the pen, signed where indicated, and threw it at me, then went into the bedroom and locked the door. I think it was at that moment that I realized she was already lost, even if she didn't realize it. The next day, I gave the signed prenuptial agreement to my lawyer for safekeeping, praying that I would never have to use it because it would mean the end of our marriage. I was useless for the rest of the day. My stomach felt like there were butterflies, and I felt sick. I thought about just taking the easy way out, but then I decided that Linda had to pass this test. If we were going to have children, I needed to know for sure that she was ready to be a mother now and not later when the children were involved. I let things unfold naturally. It was already September, and Linda and I hadn't talked about it again since she locked me out that night. Everything returned to normal until the end of August when Linda seemed to change. I returned from a mission in the afternoon, and Linda was still at work, so I started preparing dinner. As soon as she arrived, I immediately noticed that something was wrong, so I asked her about it. She shut down, saying it was just a work problem. She seemed tense for the next couple of days but didn't talk about it. We usually made love when I returned, but she said she wasn't feeling well and there was no intim for the next 2 days. On Saturday, she was herself again, as if she had made up her mind, and the weekend went well. We made love on Saturday night and Sunday morning, but her heart didn't seem to be in it. I decided to get help because I was confident that I would win the dispute, but I needed evidence for the divorce and to apply for the prenuptial agreement. I called our team planner and explained what I needed. They will keep an eye on Carl and Linda, and the surveillance team will bug their cars, Carl's office, and any room they use. I was sad about the end of my marriage, but she had been warned. I asked the team not to give me daily reports but to provide a report by the end of November. On the 15th, I was handed a folder with a report and some advice. If there is hope for reconciliation, do not look at all the photographs, only the first video. This will be enough for a divorce, the rest are not allowed in court, but please listen to the dialogue, it may help you get through this. I followed their advice and only watched the first video. It showed Linda and Clive walking down a hotel hallway, Linda opening the door and them walking in. The time was 23:30. The video was blank until 8:30 the next morning when Clive walked out of the room with a smile on his face. My marriage was over. It was time to bury him. I didn't listen to all the dialogue on the other discs, that was enough. I waited at the bottom of the stairs, just like last year, waiting for Linda. The difference was that I was wearing sweatpants instead of a tuxedo. About 6 weeks ago, Linda went to a sales conference with the team, and when she returned, she was a different woman. There was no intim, no affectionate hugs, she was completely distant and cut me off emotionally. Then I realized that she had succumbed to the advances of Clive. Although this upset me, I could no longer be intimate with her. I made up the excuse that I was suffering from orchitis and was advised to abstain from any intimate activity. I used this excuse to avoid the Christmas party, having recently been promoted to assistant sales manager. She had to go alone. She walked down the stairs, and I was surprised that she didn't make the same effort to impress as last year. She wore a simple cocktail dress, comfortable shoes, and discreet jewelry. If not for the dress, she might have been dressed for work. To say I was shocked was an understatement. She always tried to outdo the other wives at the Christmas party. She came up to me and kissed me on the cheek. I'm leaving. I won't be long, and I'll have a lot to tell you after tonight. With these words, she opened the door and left for the party. Earlier in the day, I visited my lawyer, Sarah Cox, and picked up 3 claims: a divorce claim for Linda, a deprivation of affection claim for Clive, and a claim for the company's failure to enforce its anti harassment policy against a boss. Then I went to my surveillance team. They had outdone themselves, and I wanted to reward them. They categorically refused any monetary reward, saying it was their pleasure, and if I needed anything else, just tell them. I was a little touched by their dedication and thanked them. They then gave me 3 other folders showing that Clive was involved with 2 of the 4 other women on the sales team and the company's personal assistant. When I got home, I put all the evidence and claims in my briefcase, dressed in trousers, a sports coat, and a tie, and then went to the party. On the way, I picked up a bailiff and took her with me. We arrived at the party, and it was in full swing. I presented my invitation, and we were let in along with the bailiff. We sat at a corner table, and no one paid us any attention as I pointed out the various people whose lives were about to change. When I saw Linda, she was talking animatedly to Clive, and he didn't look happy. When there was a pause in the event due to slow dancing, I decided to take action. I approached the leader of the orchestra and said that I had an announcement. He stopped the orchestra and handed me the microphone. I tapped the microphone to get everyone's attention. Good evening. I hope you are having a good time. I won't keep you long, but I have some early Christmas presents. I nodded to the bailiff, and she walked over to Linda and Clive. Linda looked shocked and opened her mouth like a goldfish. The bailiff handed Linda the first package, then turned to Clive and handed him his package. She then approached the husbands of the deceived wives and gave them their packages. Finally, she walked up to Mr. B. Benson and said those terrible words, "Are you Mr. Walter Benson?" "Yes." "Mr. Benson, you have been served with a bench warrant." She smiled at me and left the room. There was a silence in the hall that could be compared to a falling pin. Instead, the words were heard, "How could you? You cheating, and oh God, why?" Various versions of these words were heard from deceived husbands, and several sounds of slaps were heard as unfaithful wives were confronted. Clive, fearing for his safety, quickly left. Linda was still looking at me as she opened the envelope. She looked at the photographs, burst into tears, and fell to the floor crying. The first photo was of a Porsche with a red cross and the words "I won." The second showed her letting Clive into her room, and the third showed him leaving the next morning. Mr. Benson finally got my attention. "What's going on here, young man?" I took him to a quiet table and told him the facts. He was responsible since Clive first slept with Linda in a hotel room paid for by his company. Therefore, it was considered to be within the company's territory. Since then, he'd been sleeping with her at least twice a day in his office for the last 6 weeks. He also seduced 3 other women, whom he then blackmailed into doing dirty deeds. I told him that the entire company, including the CEO, knew about the affair and did nothing to stop it. Of course, the CEO only found out about his wife's affair that evening. I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there. He was so enraged. He stood up and walked to the microphone. "I ask for your attention, please." The room became silent, except for the sobbing women whose lives had just fallen apart. "It has come to my attention that some employees of our company were involved in inappropriate affairs on company premises. You know who you are, and you will need to report to HR for disciplinary action on Monday morning. Mr. Clive West, if you're still here, you're fired, without bonus or reference." As for the rest, to say I'm disappointed is an understatement. Many of you knew what was going on and did nothing. You could have saved 4 marriages, but you just talked and did nothing. I have always considered my employees to be family, and you showed me how wrong I was. Therefore, until further notice, all social events are cancelled until I can sort this out. Ryan, as CEO, you should have stopped Clive's predatory behavior as soon as you found out about it. Just because you also suffered is no excuse. You have been demoted to the position of manager of the company, and I will resume the position of general manager effective immediately. Come see me on Monday morning. To all the injured husbands, please come to me so we can discuss compensation. I advise you all to hire one attorney to represent you. Now I must apologize to Mr. D. Scott in person and find out what damage has been done. Good night, everyone. The party is over, please leave the premises. People began to leave, casting harsh glances at the guilty wives. Ralph Benson came up to me and shook my hand. "I'm sorry, son, I really am. There's a 24-hour Starbucks nearby. How about you and I grab a coffee and talk about what we can do?" "Sounds good, but first I have to talk to my soon-to-be ex-wife." "Okay, Barry, I'll see you there in a few minutes." I approached Linda. She was sitting alone, quietly crying. When I approached, she looked up. "I'm so sorry, honey. I ruined everything. Can we fix things and start again?" "Sorry, Linda, but that train has already left. You had your chance and missed it. I'm going away for a few weeks. I want you to leave home before I return. Here is the name and address of my lawyer. According to the prenuptial agreement you signed, you will only keep your clothes and what you brought to the marriage. However, you can keep your jewelry and what you have in your account. All other accounts are blocked, as are your credit cards. You came into the marriage with $3,000 in your account. My lawyer has a check for this amount for you. Please, Barry, I made a mistake and let things get out of control. I didn't want this to happen. Remember that conversation we had last Christmas when I told you what would happen if you stayed as Clive's assistant? I know you remember, so don't answer. You said you weren't a star student and you could handle him, and you refused to quit your job because you wanted that promotion. Well, you got a promotion, but look at what it cost us. Tell me, was it worth it? She started crying again as I turned and walked away. I crossed the road to meet Ralph. I still loved her and had one idea. When I entered the cafe, Ralph had already ordered. He must have been a telepath. Strong black coffee with 2 spoons of sugar, I said. I took a sip and smiled. How did you know? I've been in sales all my life. I read people like a book. If I had interviewed Clive, he would never have gotten the job. As for your coffee, you looked like a strong coffee drinker. I took a chance with the sugar. Did you guess it? Exactly. Look, I have a flight in an hour, so I'll get to the point. Are you going to fire all these wives? It occurred to me. I don't approve of cheating. Can we make a deal? If I don't file a lawsuit, will you keep Linda and promote her to replace Clive? She was an assistant in this position for 3 years and constantly said that she could do a better job than her boss. You still love her even after what she did to you, don't you? I can't do anything about it. I just can't live with her knowing what she did. Do we have a deal? Against my better judgment, yes, we have a deal. But if she can't handle it, she's fired. Okay, sounds fair. Thanks. I finished my coffee and began to leave. Barry, if you ever need a job, come see me. I have 2 other branches, and I'm always looking for talent. I smiled, nodded, shook his hand, and left. In another time and place, I'm sure we would have become friends. I boarded a plane to England and landed at Heathrow 13 hours later. I took a taxi to the Dorchester Hotel and settled into my luxurious room. Waking up late the next morning, I called room service and ordered a full English breakfast. I'd always wanted to visit the UK and try a full English breakfast. When it arrived, it looked like a heart attack on a plate. Everything was unhealthy except the eggs. I cautiously tried everything, and it was delicious. I ate everything and drank 2 cups of what the English call coffee. During my stay in England, I wanted to see everything, and the hotel doorman was more than happy to help me plan my day and avoid the tourist traps. On the last day, I called my team and asked to set up a meeting with Clive West. It was time for my revenge. As I left the hotel for the last time, I gave Tom, the doorman, a generous tip and said goodbye. I had enjoyed my time in England and promised myself I would return someday. I returned home the next day and walked into my house, which I could no longer call a home. It seemed empty and cold. I immediately realized how much I missed Linda. As I unpacked, noticing that all of Linda's things were gone, I felt empty inside at her loss. I went out to eat and drink a few beers. After a few drinks, I was escorted into a taxi and taken home. I woke up late the next morning and realized it was Sunday and I couldn't do anything until Monday. After picking up the car, I cleaned the yard and watered the flower beds. While cleaning up the grass, I saw my neighbor and asked him if he was the one watering the flowers. He said Linda had come by several times to water them. To say I was surprised is an understatement. Why did she do this? On Monday, I called my lawyer and made an appointment for the same day. After her first Christmas party when I introduced Clive to Barry, I noticed the tension between them. I saw a battle of testosterone when they shook hands, which Barry won easily. Their exchange was hostile, and I was afraid Barry would make a scene, so I pulled Clive aside to shake hands with the others. I was so preoccupied that I didn't notice how much time had passed. I looked at our table and saw that Barry was no longer there, so I went to look for him. When I couldn't find him, I asked one of the husbands who he usually talked to if he knew where Barry was. He had gone home. I saw him take his coat and leave. I was furious. Did he say why? He didn't need to. You left him alone for more than 3 hours. I think he realized that he was not needed. I saw a note in my wallet. Have you read it yet? I went to our table, took out my wallet, and found a note. You don't need me, so I went home. It was simply signed Barry rather than love, Barry, and my anger increased. I looked at my watch. More than 3.5 hours had passed, and I had left my husband alone. No wonder he was angry. I took my wallet and headed for the exit but realized I had no money and hadn't brought my card with me. How would I get home? Opening my wallet, I found 2 $20 bills. Barry had thought of everything. When I returned home, Barry was already asleep. I started screaming at him, saying that he had embarrassed me. He just sat there and said, "We'll talk in the morning." I insisted on talking now. He said I had made him look like a cuckold by parading with Clive. When I denied it, he gave me his phone and told me to watch the video he had made. I watched the clip with horror, realizing that he was right. We really did look like a couple. I felt terrible, but when I went to apologize, he had already gone into the guest room and locked the door. I knocked on the door and apologized loudly, but he said we'd talk in the morning. The next morning, I got up before Barry and started making one of his favorite breakfasts. When I heard him get up, I finished preparing breakfast so that everything would be ready when he arrived. We ate in silence, and I wondered what he was thinking about. After finishing breakfast, I began to apologize, saying that there was nothing between me and Clive. He said he believed me and then explained how I had fallen into Clive's trap and what he would do next to get to my underpants. At first, I was shocked, but then everything fell into place. Barry was right about everything, as if Clive was following the script Barry had written. But when Barry asked me to leave Benson's, I got angry and said that I would never betray his trust. I'm not a schoolgirl with starry eyes. I can take care of myself. At one point, he said he would bet I would cheat before next Christmas if I didn't leave Benson's. I knew I would never cheat on Barry. I would rather die, so I accepted his bet and asked for a new car when he lost. I also asked what he wanted if he won. He said he would think about it. Over the next 2 months, everything happened exactly as Barry had predicted. Clive took every opportunity to be close to me, but I was ready. He dangled a carrot for me in the form of a promotion to sales manager, since Kim was leaving at the end of the year. We went to lunch a couple of times to discuss work issues that could have been discussed in the office. And yes, he often touched me, supposedly by accident, but I understood his game and smiled internally every time. He started asking questions about Barry's job and when he was leaving. As Barry had warned me, he held my hand a couple of times, and when I didn't object, he began to stroke it. I politely removed my hand. He apologized, saying that he didn't realize how he was doing it. Around this time, Barry brought home an envelope from his lawyer and asked me to sign it. He said it was a prenuptial agreement that he would enforce in the event of my infidelity. I signed it without reading it, knowing that it wouldn't be needed. We were a strong couple. Our sales team had to travel for an important meeting with a client, and we were away for 3 days. When the client signed the contract, Clive suggested we celebrate, so we all went to dinner, except Kim, who wanted to go home early. We had dinner at the hotel, and Clive suggested we have a drink in the bar. We agreed, but when we got to the bar, there were no seats, so we sat at a table, and Clive ordered drinks. As we were sitting, the orchestra set up and started playing, so we danced a few times. After the third drink, which I usually only allow myself, Clive and I were slow dancing when he leaned over and kissed me. At first, I kissed him back, but then I hit him in the face and left. He ran after me, apologizing, saying he had drunk too much and couldn't help himself because I was so beautiful. Straight out of the script. Barry and I almost got caught. I was so ashamed and angry at myself and at Barry for always being right. If I had had a couple more cocktails, I probably would have ended up in bed with Clive that night. I left early in the morning before breakfast and went home. When I returned, Barry must have noticed something was wrong and asked what he could do to help. I just shut down and was edgy all day Friday. I went to bed not knowing what to do about Clive, but in the middle of the night, as sometimes happens, I had an idea. I would report Clive to HR on Monday and leave work. On Saturday morning, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I pressed myself against Barry, and we made love with a desperation I had never felt before. We made love again that night and the next morning. I'm sure Barry knew we had reached a watershed in our relationship. I went to work on Monday determined to put an end to this farce and put Clive in his place. When I arrived, Clive was waiting for me and invited me into his office. "Linda, I'm so sorry about what happened Thursday night. I drank too much and wasn't thinking clearly. I know you're mad at me right now, but please don't do anything rash. I talked to old Benson, and he's going to recommend you for the manager position. But if you make a fuss now, the board of directors won't be impressed, and you could lose your job. I promise to stay away from you if you give me a second chance." I considered his offer because I wanted the promotion. In the end, I agreed, and life went on as usual. The company's annual sales conference was approaching, and all 3 offices from across the country were expected to attend. I was told that my promotion would be announced at the conference. It was supposed to take place in a neighboring state, and for the last 2 days, there was to be a corporate ball for employees. We all went there separately and registered. I went down for dinner and sat at a table with some colleagues. I had a pleasant evening and drank a couple of glasses of wine. I was tired, so I went to bed early because the next day promised to be eventful. I wore a business suit to attend various meetings. The day went well, and at the last event, the awards were presented, and my promotion was announced to great applause. Then I went to dinner and had a couple of glasses of wine to celebrate. Clive was sitting at the other end of the table. He kept his word and didn't try to pester me anymore. After dinner, I changed into a cocktail dress for the annual ball. Entering the ballroom, I noticed our team and joined them. Several men from other offices asked me to dance, and I agreed. They were all gentlemen and kept their distance. Toward the end of the evening, Mr. B. Benson excused himself and left. Clive immediately asked me to dance, and since I had not danced with him all evening, I agreed. We did 2 dances, and I realized that I didn't feel any pain at all, probably because of the wine and the 3 cocktails I had drunk. When Clive insisted on a last dance, I didn't mind, even though it was a slow dance. We slowly twirled around the dance floor. He held me tightly, and at the end of the dance, he kissed me. Instead of pushing him away, I kissed him back. Our tongues started their own dance. We kissed like we couldn't stop, and I didn't know how to stop it. I woke up in the morning and didn't understand why I was lying without anything on the bed. I screamed and ran to the bathroom, only catching a glimpse of Clive lying next to where I had been, with a smirk on his face. I tried to wash off his touch, crying over what I had done. Barry was right, he had seduced me for Christmas, and now my life was over. When I could no longer wash myself, I returned to the bedroom. Clive was already dressed, with a grin on his face. Well, little Miss Good Girl, it took me almost a year, but it was worth it. You are one sweet treat. I will enjoy having a night with you now and knowing that your husband doesn't know that I slept with his wife. For Monday, you will go to work without panties so that I can use you whenever I want. I will never let you have an intimate with me again. What did you give me, you an idiot? Well, he said with a smirk, we have a long and cute relationship ahead of us. But to answer your question, I slipped some stuff into your drink, and you took off like a rocket. You were my main goal, but you were so in love with this cuckolding husband that it took me almost a year, and in the end, I had to pill you. Now, Molly and Christine succumbed in just 2 months, and SEO's beloved wife, Lucy, in almost 6 months. And as for the fact that you will never again, if you don't sleep with me, look at this. He picked up his phone, and there were pictures of me without clothes on the bed. I started crying again. Well, don't cry. Think about how much pleasure awaits us behind your husband's back. Now, if you don't want me to send these photos to dear Barry, please satisfy me now. I cried and did what he said. When he let go, I vomited on the carpet. He looked at me and said, I'll forgive it this once, but if you do it again, your husband will get a surprise. He left the room, and I got dressed and went home, not even caring about breakfast. When I came home, I couldn't look Barry in the eyes and wondered what would happen next. I was sure that Barry would understand what I had done and divorce me. Barry did his best to stay away. He told me he had testiculitis and that he wouldn't be able to have a night for several weeks. I went to work on Monday as usual, and Clive was waiting for me. He called me into his office and locked the door. Okay, Linda, you know what I want. I hope you're not wearing any underwear. Barry and I barely spoke that night, and when he asked what happened, I made an excuse and went to bed. The same thing happened the next day and the day after that. After several days of trying, he finally gave in and began sleeping with either Molly or Christine. I still had to please him from time to time, and I hated him for it, but I hadn't yet figured out how to get out of it and stay married. The morning of the Christmas party arrived, and Clive called me into his office. Well, you were a big disappointment. Why couldn't you enjoy intimate with me like these other women? We could have had fun, but I won't let you go so easily. On the first day after vacation, I have potential clients to deal with. Meet me at the Silver Dollar for dinner, and you're on the menu. I told them about you, and they can't wait to make you theirs after the contract is signed. See you tonight. There was no way I was going to submit to this. Clive and his harem were in for a surprise that night. Barry said he was still too uncomfortable to go to the party, but that I should go. Okay, I could burn Clive and then explain everything to Barry when I got home. I knew my marriage was probably over, but I couldn't live like this anymore. It was killing me. I had lost weight because I was throwing up after every meal and hadn't slept well for over 6 weeks. I dressed modestly for the ball, and I'm sure Barry noticed because he looked at me strangely as I left. I noticed that his goodbye was cold and indifferent. No see you later, no love you. It was as if we'd never see each other again. I arrived at the event and walked around, avoiding eye contact with many of those I had spoken to. The rumor had already spread. I was a pariah. No one would sit at my table, so I sat alone and held back my tears. When Clive came in, he walked over to me and sat down next to me with a grin on his face. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You can wipe that grin off your face. Whatever you have planned for Monday, it won't happen. After Mr. B. Benson's Christmas speech, I'll tell him everything you've done and name names. My marriage may be over, but your career isn't. We'll survive, and when Barry gets to you, I doubt you will too." Suddenly, the music stopped, and a voice I knew all too well began to destroy people's lives. It was my husband, taking revenge. At that moment, a woman came up to me and asked if I was Linda Scott. When I confirmed, she handed me an envelope and said, "You have been served notice." She then did the same to Clive. She walked over to Molly and Christine's husbands and gave them each a package, the same thing she did with our CEO and then with Mr. Benson. My husband was standing next to Mr. Benson, and I almost fainted. I opened the envelope, already knowing what would be inside, divorce papers. But the first thing I pulled out was a photo of the Porsche I wanted, with a big red cross on it and the words "I won" in capital letters. I then pulled out 2 more photos of Clive coming and going from my hotel room. I fell to the floor, and 2 men helped me into a chair. Molly and her husband were screaming at each other, and Christine was lying on the floor, holding her face, apparently having been hit. 2 men held her husband, who was crying like a child. I didn't see the CEO or his wife, so I don't know what happened to them. Mr. Benson took the microphone and announced that the party was over and strict action would be taken starting Monday. He then sat down next to Barry, and they started talking. Mr. Benson then left the room, and I never saw him again. Barry stood in front of me with a very sad expression. He told me he was leaving and would be back in 3 weeks, by which time I had to pack my things and leave. He said a lot more, and I begged him to take me back, but he just left. I was afraid to go to work on Monday, but I showed up on time. A security guard was waiting to escort me to Mr. B. Benson's office. When we were let in, he dismissed the guard and invited me to sit down. I sat down and noticed a box of tissues in front of me. I took one to dry my eyes. "Well, young lady, you and some others have pretty much screwed up your marriages. If you had come to me sooner, all of this could have been avoided. I would have punished West and compensated you. However, you didn't, and now we need to decide what to do with you. West has disappeared, and I do not expect to see him again. I like to consider myself a fair person, so if you tell me everything without hiding anything, I will make a decision based on this. I warn you, I can recognize a lie from 50 miles away. If you lie, you're finished. Start from the beginning and don't miss a single detail." I started from the first time I met Clive and told him the whole story, leaving nothing out, not even the intimate details. By the end, I was in tears, and he handed me more tissues. "Thank you for your honesty. You have really opened my eyes. I see that this was more than just a random affair, it was a well-planned and executed attack on your marriage and others. It seems you held out the longest and eventually had to be pilled, but that doesn't justify you not coming to me after that. It shows a flaw in your decision-making. Which brings me to another topic, your husband must love you very much. Since we talked that night after my resignation, we made a deal. He would withdraw his claim, which I believe would be a high 6-figure sum, if I kept you in the job that Clive held. I agreed. You are now a senior sales representative at Benson's company. Congratulations." He extended his hand, and I shook it. "Thank you. This is more than I deserve. I won't let you down, I promise. Don't thank me too soon. You have a lot of work ahead of you rebuilding your sales team. I'm going to fire both Molly and Christine. They both help destroy your marriage. And don't forget, I'll be watching you very closely. If you don't handle it, you'll be out. I hope you understand this. I understand, and you won't be disappointed. With that, I got up and went to the new office. Barry helped me again, and I only heard him say, "Barry." I went to my lawyer, Sarah. She said that Linda came to her, picked up the check, and was ready to sign the divorce papers with one condition. She wanted to meet with me for half an hour to try to explain what happened. Sarah advised her to agree, as otherwise Linda could delay the divorce for at least a year. I asked Sarah to arrange a meeting that afternoon. I informed the team about what was happening and asked for some time. They immediately agreed and placed the team on standby indefinitely. I contacted the team planner to arrange a meeting with Clive. You see, Clive left the party and disappeared from view. He moved to another state and took a job as a marketing manager for a small printing company. He immediately started hitting on the female staff and was on a date with a married woman in a cafe. He managed to slip something into her drink and was looking forward to a night, since her husband was on a business trip. When the pair walked out to Clive's car, the teen tasered and sedated him, and the unconscious woman was taken to a local hospital. When Clive woke up, he was a little dazed but quickly realized that he was hanging by his wrists. He looked around and saw that he was hanging over a 45-gallon barrel with some kind of liquid. The first sound he heard was, "Boss, he's awake." 4 men in ski masks approached him, and his bladder gave out. He peed himself. The 4 men laughed, and one of them spoke. "Hey, Clive, looks like your evening didn't go according to plan. Don't worry, the woman you were with is in the hospital with a headache and nothing else. I'm betting she'll have an explanation for her husband about why she was dressed up to go out and why she was in a cafe with another man. But this is not our problem. You have much more serious problems now. First, you are probably wondering what is in the barrel. This is a very unpleasant composition of corrosive substances intended for dissolving the body in a matter of hours, but not yours, well, at least for now. Do you recognize my voice?" "No," Clive said, confused. "Let's enlighten you," said the man who spoke, removing his mask. Clive thought, "I'm lost. It's Barry Scott. Now I probably found out the guy you deceived by pilling his wife with something and dragging her into bed." "Yes, I know," she agreed, "but it was under the influence of substances you gave her, and then you blackmailed her to have a night whenever you wanted. You achieved your goal, ruined our marriage, but now you have to pay. I understand that part of the pleasure of your seduction is the anticipation of the reward. Well, let's see how you like the anticipation of what you will experience over the next 3 days. You're probably thinking about going to the police after this, but if you do, 2 things will happen. First, my friends will find you and put you in this barrel. You may not care since your life is ruined anyway, but they will also take your sister and nieces and auction them off in Mexico. They pay a good price for blonde, white women there. Well, how do you like this expectation?" There was nothing to say. The cat got his tongue. We took him off the hook he was hanging from and tied him to a chair. Over the next 3 days, I made good on my promises, and we dumped the man's wreckage on the side of the road and called 911. The police questioned me about his abduction, but I had an alibi. I was on a flight from England at the time. Clive never revealed what happened to him. He only said that he did not remember anything after leaving the cafe. I sat in Sarah's empty office waiting for Linda to arrive. Sarah was with me and said the entire meeting would be recorded for my safety. Linda was ushered into the office, and I noticed that she was trying very hard to look attractive for this meeting. Her hair was freshly washed and styled, her makeup was in place, and she was dressed in attractive clothes. She looked like $1 million, but to me, it could have been burlap, it would have had no effect. I was dressed casually, which emphasized my indifference to her. I started the dialogue. "Okay, Sarah, you wanted this meeting. What do you want?" "First of all, I want to say how sorry I am. I was trying not to hurt you. I was pilled with something the first time, and I couldn't control myself. After that, he blackmailed me to be his night toy. I finally realized that I would never be free from him and was about to expose him at the Christmas party when you set off a nuclear explosion and destroyed everything. What you saw when you walked in was what I told him I was going to do. I know all this, but it doesn't absolve you of guilt. You had plenty of warnings about what he was planning, but you continued hoping for your promotion. When he first tried to kiss you, you should have stopped everything. But no, you didn't do that. You continued to meet with him behind my back until he pilled you into bed. Even then, you could have come to me, and I would have forgiven you. But no, you decided to cope on your own, sleeping with him for the next 6 weeks. I can't look at you anymore. You're a used commodity, defiled by his filth. So if you're looking for reconciliation, forget it. You ruined everything the first time you slept with him after he got you at the hotel. Are we done, or do I need to listen to more of your weak excuses? Linda, already crying, stood up and ran out of the room. I shouted after her, "Don't forget to sign the divorce papers on the way out." Linda moved in with her parents until she found a place to live. The house we lived in together was a perk of my job, so I lived there alone. One night, her mother called me. We always got along well. They considered me the son they never had. Barry, Linda is in a terrible state. She only works, barely eats, and spends all her time in her room crying. I'm afraid she might hurt herself. Can't you forgive her? She knows it's all her fault, and so do I. I'm sure she'll never do anything so stupid again. Mom, I'm sorry it came to this. I really am. I'm just as hurt as she is, but there's no going back. She made her choice, and now she has to live with the consequences. I still love her, but I can't turn it off. If it's any consolation, I'm in pain too, but every time I think about her, it's like a dagger in my heart. She hurts me so much. I don't think I'll ever trust another woman again. I can't bear this kind of pain again. Please tell her that I wish her the best and that she moves on. Later that week, her father called, and I expected the same plea, but he surprised me. Hey, son. I know Mom called earlier this week. I just wanted you to know I support your position. If Mom had pulled that stunt on me when I was your age, I'd probably still be in prison for multiple murders. I gave Linda hell for what she did, but she is still my daughter, so I support her as best I can. I also want to thank you for not physically harming her, even though she deserves it. If you need someone to talk to, just call, and we can meet somewhere for a couple of drinks. I know you and Linda are through, but please don't disappear. Dad, you have no idea how much your words mean to me. I really wish I could put this behind me and take back what we had, but it's too fresh right now, and I can't think straight when it comes to Linda. Maybe in a year or two, I can forgive her and we can be friends, but I don't promise anything. Please tell her that I love her and that she can move on with her life. That was the last time I spoke to her parents. I returned to work, and life went on. I didn't date. I didn't want intimate relationships anymore. When I felt the need, I just used the services of an elite intimate agency, but I never took the same girl twice. I became better at day trading and was making good money. 2 months later, Colonel Scott called me and explained that our department would be expanded. We were going to create 2 new teams, one in England covering Europe and one in Japan covering Asia and the Far East. I was offered to lead the team in England, which would consist of 5 people from France, Germany, Italy, and, of course, the UK. I would lead the team but not participate in missions. The team would include a sergeant and staff, including planners, intelligence officers, suppliers, and cyber intelligence specialists. I accepted the offer because I was starting to mark time, and of course, there was an increase in salary, though without a bonus for the work in general. Financially, everything was about the same. I accepted the offer because I was no longer happy where I was. Every time I went out, something would remind me of Linda, and the pain would start again. I needed a fresh start. I'll be leaving at the end of the month. I collected everything I wanted to take with me or send and put the rest in storage. I left home with mixed feelings. I was sad because we had so many happy memories, and I was glad that all the sadness was behind us. I arrived in England and was met by an embassy car. My base was in London at the embassy, and my apartment was in Chelsea. The apartment was 2 rooms with a kitchen and living room. I felt comfortable. The cleaning lady came twice a week, and the security guard picked me up every morning and dropped me off after work. I met the team, and we got to know each other as best we could, considering I was staying in London while they were based at the SAS barracks in Hereford. Our communication was mostly over the phone. I quickly got used to the job and was surprised by the number of calls we handled throughout the year. Our top operative was racking up an impressive score, and the criminal elements were in disarray. This continued for the next 5 years, during which I missed the weather in the US, where it seemed like it rained constantly in the winter and there was drought in the summer. Who would have thought I would leave the company and return home not knowing what to expect? I found a nice 3-room house in a gated community and moved there. I no longer needed a job but continued to play the market, earning enough money to keep my savings intact. I ate out almost every night and worked out at the local gym 3 times a week. I went to concerts, plays, and sometimes to the movies. The latter turned out to be fateful. I had just seen the latest Marvel movie and was sitting at Kim's Cafe, enjoying a steak and beer, when someone sat down across from me. I looked up and almost choked on a piece of meat. Linda was sitting opposite me. Damn, this is exactly what I need. So, won't you at least say hi after all these years? My heart began to beat like crazy. This woman still influenced me more than I wanted to admit. I realized that I was glad to see her and that I no longer held the grudge I had carried for so long. Hey, Linda, you look good, was all I could say. And indeed, she looked good, much calmer than I felt, that's for sure. Is that all you can say? Not how are you? Or glad to see you? Sorry, you caught me off guard. Yes, I'm glad to see you. What are you doing here? I asked, looking around for her companion. I'm with a few girls from work. We go out once a month for a bachelorette party and dinner afterward. Look, Barry, we have a lot to discuss, but not here. Call me and we'll meet. Please don't brush me off, this is really important. Now, I need to get back to the others, or they'll think I'm having an imaginary affair, if you know what I mean. She took out a business card and wrote her number on the back. I watched her walk away. Damn, I thought I had already forgotten her, and now I'm looking after her again and thinking about what could have been. It had to be if she had remained faithful. My stomach churned, and I was ready to tear up the card, but she seemed so insistent that I decided to leave it. My dinner was ruined, so I called the waiter for the bill. As I paid, I saw Linda and her friends smiling at me. Call me petty, but I didn't pay them any attention and just walked away. I couldn't get her out of my head the whole way home. If only we hadn't collided. I didn't sleep well that night, got up early, and went to the gym, trying to distract myself. It didn't work, she was still in my head. So, I decided to call her, but not right away. Let her get nervous and think that I wasn't going to call. I waited until Thursday and called her. The card said she was now the CEO of Benson's, and I wondered with distaste who she'd slept with for that promotion. I immediately reproached myself for such an unworthy thought. I dialed her number, and she answered immediately. Hey Barry, I thought you'd never call. I had my reasons. Look, if you still want to meet, I'm ready. How about Friday night at that diner? Sorry, Barry, I'm going to my mom's for dinner Friday night. How about we meet for lunch at the diner at, say, 2, and talk? Okay, see you later, and I hung up. On Saturday morning, I was doing my shopping as usual, but I kept thinking about Linda and why she wanted to talk after all these years. I returned home and changed into trousers and a polo, not exactly smart, but not too casual either. I shouldn't have worried. When I arrived, she was sitting in a booth in the corner, apparently for privacy. She was wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and a denim jacket. She stood up as I approached, and when I extended my hand to shake hands, she pulled me in and kissed me on the cheek. My stomach fluttered, and I stepped back to look at her. She smiled as if she had just won a bet and sat back down. I sat down and stared at the menu but didn't see anything because my thoughts were still on that kiss. Hell, she could still play me like a fiddle, and I had to take the lead. So, Linda, what was so important that we had to meet and bring back all the pain? Haven't we both suffered enough? I'm sorry if I made you suffer again, that wasn't my intention. You looked so lost when you walked in that I thought you needed me to kiss you like before. Let's order and talk later. I'm really hungry. I came straight from the gym and didn't have breakfast. We ordered bacon and eggs, waffles for Linda, and a bagel for me. We both ordered coffee. While we ate, we exchanged news about our lives over the past 5 years. Linda was promoted to CEO when Ray Barnes left for greener pastures and Ralph Benson returned to semi-retirement. Linda asked about my last 5 years but realized that I could not say much because my work was classified. She seemed genuinely interested when I told her that I had received my trader's license and was working successfully. We talked about nothing until dessert arrived, but when it was cleared away and more coffee was brought, Linda's attitude changed. "Barry, the first thing I want to say is that I missed you every day that we were apart and I never stopped loving you. You should also know that I tried to find you for 2 years, but the government didn't even recognize that you worked for them. I stopped searching when 2 people in black suits came to me and told me to stop since it was a matter of national security. I didn't know what to think. Was I really married to James Bond and didn't know about it? Then we met by chance, and here we are. I need to know if you're still working for the government before I go any further." "No, Lynn, I left that life behind and now I just work for myself as a trader." "In that case, there's something you need to know." She took an envelope from her purse, opened it, and then took out a photograph, handing it to me with a smile. The photo was of a little girl about 5 years old, looking at the camera and smiling. I immediately saw the resemblance to Linda and raised an eyebrow at the question. "Her name is Sarah Jane Scott, and she is our daughter. Here's the proof." She handed me a birth certificate and 2 sheets of paper. On the certificate, I was listed as the father, and the other 2 sheets were the results of a DNA test confirming that I was her father. I sat there dumbfounded. Is this some kind of joke to bring me back, or is it true? How? When? The last time we made love was before Clive and me. I wasn't feeling well and was throwing up every morning. I thought it was stress, but after you left, I went to the doctor, and he said that I was in my 4th month. I was in a panic. I thought it was Clive's, but I couldn't have an abortion in case it was yours, so I carried her to term. When she was born and I saw her for the first time, I immediately understood that she is ours. So she did a DNA test, and now she's your daughter, Barry. I know you always wanted children, so now you have one decision to make, whether you want to be a part of her life and in what capacity. You have a choice. You can be an absentee father, a weekend father, or a full-time father. I need to know this before I introduce you to her. She will recognize you immediately since we have a photo hanging on the wall of our wedding and a picture of us together on the mantle. You see, I never gave up hope that we would get back together. On the other hand, if you're not interested in being a father, just walk away, and I'll never contact you again. The choice is yours." I sat there like a complete idiot. I was already fascinated by this little girl, and I hadn't met her yet. How could I not want to be in her life? She was a part of me, perhaps the best part. I looked at Linda's smiling face and just nodded. I had tears in my eyes and a stupid smile on my face. She realized that I agreed. The bait was too tempting. "I can see by your face that you want to be in her life. We'll decide in what capacity as we go along. Now finish your coffee, and I'll take you home so you can meet her." The walk to Linda's house was silent, my mind racing and jumping with different thoughts. When we arrived at a very beautiful house in a prestigious area and got out of the car, the front door opened and a small blonde whirlwind rushed towards her mother. "Mom, I missed you. Is this the person in your wedding photo?" "Yes, honey, it's your dad." Hearing her call me daddy almost broke my heart, and I had to wipe the tears from my eyes. "Mom, why is daddy crying? Is he sad?" "No, honey, he's just so happy to see that he can't help himself. Now go say hello to him and take him inside." She came up to me a little shyly and took my hand. "Hello, my name is Sarah. Would you like to see my room? Mom said it would be fine. Let's go." "Hello, Sarah. My name is Barry, and I'd love to see your room." "My name is Barry, and I'd love to see your room." "No, silly, your dad, not Barry," she said, and she pulled me along with her. Linda stood and smiled with tears streaming down her face. Needless to say, Linda and I soon got back together and were married within a year, with Sarah being the maid of honor, with a little help from Linda's mom. Now, it's been 2 years, and I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I love it, although the nanny does most of the work. Linda runs Benson's but will soon have to take maternity leave as she is expecting another little Scott soon. I'm happy, there's no doubt about it. What do you think of our story today? I think he did the right thing by installing a surveillance camera in the room, so he knew what he needed to know. What's your impression? Let me know in the comments. Until next time.